Ethan Ward had lived on his ranch for so many years that people in town sometimes joked he was part of the land itself. He enjoyed the simple routines, waking before sunrise, feeding the horses, checking the fences, riding across the fields, and ending the day with quiet dinners at his wooden kitchen table. Life on the ranch was peaceful, but it was also lonely. Most days, the only voices he heard were the soft sounds of animals and the wind brushing through the dry grass. One Saturday morning, Ethan drove into town to pick up supplies. The small town he lived in was friendly, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else and people still waved at strangers on the street. That day, colorful banners hung across the town square, and the familiar sound of laughter, music, and chatter floated in the air. He had almost forgotten that it was the day of the annual charity auction. The charity event was something the town held every year to help families going through difficult times. People donated handmade goods, baked treats, wooden crafts, or a day of their time to support those in need. Ethan never planned to stay long. He only wanted to buy the hay he came for and go back home. But as he passed the square, he noticed a crowd gathering around the small wooden stage. Something about the moment made him slow down and park his truck. When Ethan stepped out, he saw cheerful faces everywhere. Children ran around with balloons, older folks sat under umbrellas sipping lemonade, and volunteers moved between tables decorated with small items ready to be auctioned. Ethan wasn't the type to join big gatherings often, but there was a warm energy in the air that made him linger. The auctioneer, a tall man with a friendly smile, tapped the microphone and called everyone to attention. "All right, folks, next up is something special." His voice rose with excitement. "We have a support day donated by Lena Brooks. Whoever wins the bid will receive a full day where Lena helps with anything you need. Cleaning, organizing, running errands, whatever good work you require. And remember, every penny goes to support her family as they get through a hard season." At the mention of her name, Ethan's eyes followed the direction everyone was looking. Standing beside the stage was a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, with calm eyes and a tired but warm smile. She didn't seem the type who liked attention. Her posture was modest, her hands folded in front of her. But her gaze was steady. She looked like someone who carried more responsibility than most people her age. Ethan had seen her around town a few times, mostly at the grocery store or helping her younger siblings get ice cream on hot afternoons. He remembered hearing someone mention that her father had fallen ill earlier that year, leaving the family struggling to keep up with bills and farm repairs. Ethan didn't know the details, but he could see the quiet determination on her face, the kind that came from working hard because life gave her no other choice. The bidding began, and people called out numbers. It started small, but Ethan could sense the crowd's admiration for her courage. Still, as the price rose, fewer hands went up. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. He had not planned to participate, and he was not someone who often stepped into the center of things. But something inside him nudged gently. Here was a young woman trying to help her family by giving her own time and effort. The least he could do was support that. Before he could think too deeply about it, Ethan raised his hand. The auctioneer nodded and called out his bid. A few others countered, but Ethan continued. He didn't shout or show excitement. He simply raised his hand again whenever someone else did. Soon the bidding slowed, and the auctioneer looked around the crowd. For the final time, going once, going twice, sold to Ethan Ward. The audience clapped politely, and the auctioneer moved on to the next item. Ethan stepped back, feeling a strange mix of comfort and nervousness. He wasn't used to attention, but when he glanced toward Lena, she looked at him with genuine gratitude. She didn't smile widely, but her eyes softened as if she was silently saying thank you. Ethan gave her a small nod, almost embarrassed but also glad he had stepped up. After the auction, he walked toward the table where volunteers were writing receipts and collecting donations. Lena was standing there helping organize papers. When she noticed him approach, she looked up. "You're Ethan Ward, right?" she asked softly. Yes, ma'am, he replied, adjusting his hat, suddenly aware of how dusty his boots were. It seems I won your support day. Her smile grew, still small yet sincere. Thank you. It means a lot to my family. Ethan shook his head lightly. No need to thank me. I'm just glad the money helps. Lena handed him a slip of paper with her address and asked, When would you like me to come out and help you? Ethan hesitated. He had not thought that far. His ranch was large, but he had no real task that required someone else's help. The truth was, he hadn't bid because he needed assistance. He had done it because he felt she deserved support more than he needed a worker. How about tomorrow? She said, noticing his pause. Or any day you like. I'm free to help with whatever you need. Ethan cleared his throat. Tomorrow works. But the truth is, I'm not sure I need anything done at the ranch. He didn't want her to think he bid out of pity. He wanted her to feel respected. Lena raised her eyebrows slightly. So you paid for my help, but you don't need help? Ethan felt flustered but nodded. I just wanted to contribute. She looked thoughtful for a moment. Then she said something he would remember forever. Not rude, not forceful, just honest. You paid for me. Now do it, she said gently. Let me help. It will make me feel better knowing you got value for what you gave. Her words carried meaning far deeper than the surface. She wasn't talking about ownership or obligation. She simply wanted to honor her promise with dignity. She wanted to give back. Ethan understood. He smiled faintly. All right, then. Come by tomorrow morning. There's always something small to fix around the ranch. She nodded and thanked him again. As she walked back toward her family, Ethan watched her for a moment. He noticed the way she carried herself, quiet strength, steady steps, and a heart that refused to give up even when life became heavy. Driving home, Ethan felt a strange warmth inside. He didn't fully know why he felt so drawn to help her, but the feeling stayed with him long after he reached the ranch. That night, he made a simple dinner, sat by the window, and looked out across the open land. For the first time in a long while, he felt anticipation for the next day. He didn't know it yet, but the moment he raised his hand at the auction, his life began to shift in ways he never expected. The next morning, Ethan woke earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, and only the faintest blue light touched the horizon. He moved through his morning chores quickly, feeling an unusual nervousness he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't sure why. After all, it was only a day of help from someone he barely knew. But something about Lena's quiet strength had stayed with him all night. He waited near the barn, wiping down his tools even though they were already clean. Every few minutes, he checked the road leading to his ranch. He told himself he was just making sure she could find the place easily, but the truth was, he wanted everything to go smoothly. He didn't want her to feel uncomfortable or out of place. Around 8 o'clock, a small, older car appeared in the distance. Dust rose behind its tires as it rolled closer. When it stopped near the gate, Ethan straightened up, dusted off his jeans, and walked forward. Lena stepped out of the car with a gentle smile. Her clothes were simple but neat, and her hair was pulled back in a loose braid. She looked slightly shy but ready to work. She waved softly and Ethan nodded back. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he replied, trying not to sound as stiff as he felt. "Hope the drive wasn't too long." "It was peaceful," she said. "Your land is really beautiful." Ethan glanced over the wide fields and old wooden fences. He had seen this land his whole life, but hearing someone else call it beautiful made him look at it differently. "Thank you," he said with a small smile. She stood beside him, waiting. When he didn't say anything for a second too long, she lightly cleared her throat. "So," she said with gentle humor, "you paid for my day. Now tell me what you want me to do." Her words were soft, but they carried a deep honesty. She wasn't reminding him of money. She was reminding him to let her keep her dignity. Ethan understood that clearly. "Well," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "there are always things to do around here. Nothing too hard. I thought maybe you could help with the storage shed first. It needs sorting." "Perfect," she said, smiling like she was relieved to finally begin. He led her to the old shed behind the barn. Inside, there were boxes, tools, ropes, and random items collected over the years. It wasn't a mess, but it wasn't neat either. Lena looked at everything with calm eyes. "I can do this," she said. Ethan tried to help, but she gave him a playful look. "If you help, then what's the point of me being here?" He laughed softly, the sound surprising him. "All right," he said. "I'll let you take the lead." As she worked, Ethan stayed nearby, fixing a loose fence rail. Every now and then, he glanced at her. She moved quietly, carefully, placing things in order with patience and purpose. She didn't rush. She didn't complain. She simply worked. After an hour, she stepped out of the shed, wiped her hands on her jeans, and said, "Done." Ethan walked inside and paused. "Well," he said, impressed, "you might have organized it better than I ever did." She laughed lightly. "Maybe." "Thank you," he said quietly. "You're welcome," she replied. They moved on to the next task, cleaning the small garden beside the house. As they worked, they talked in short, gentle conversations. She asked, "You live alone out here?" "Yes," he said. "It's peaceful, but sometimes too quiet." She nodded. "I understand quiet. At my home, it's busy with my siblings, but inside me it feels quiet, a lot of the time." "Because of the responsibilities?" he asked carefully. She paused, pulling a weed from the garden bed. "Yes. After my father fell ill, there was no choice. Everyone had to help more. I try to do what I can." "Seems like you do a lot," Ethan said. She shrugged, not boasting, simply stating a truth. "Life doesn't wait for you to feel ready." Ethan admired how calmly she accepted things that would overwhelm many people her age. She didn't brag. She didn't complain. She just kept moving forward. After a while, Ethan noticed she seemed lost in thought. "Everything all right?" he asked. She looked up and nodded, though her eyes carried a tiredness that didn't match her smile. "I'm okay. Just thinking about things. Sometimes work helps me clear my mind." "Same here," he said. They shared a quiet moment, working side by side. It felt natural, even though they hardly knew each other. When noon approached, Ethan said, "Lunchtime. I cooked something simple. Hope you don't mind." She smiled gratefully. "I'd love that." He led her into his house, a cozy but plain place with wooden floors, soft light, and simple furniture. She looked around respectfully, not judging anything. Ethan placed 2 plates on the table. They ate in comfortable silence at first, then spoke softly about their families, their plans, their daily routines. At one point, Lena looked at him with thoughtful eyes. "Can I ask something?" "Sure." "Why did you bid on me?" she asked softly. "I don't mean anything strange by it. I just want to know what made you raise your hand." Ethan paused, choosing his words slowly. "I saw someone who gives a lot," he said quietly. "Someone who works hard for her family. And I thought maybe supporting that was the right thing to do." Her eyes softened. "That's kind," she whispered. "It's the truth," he replied. For a moment, their eyes met in a quiet connection, neither fully understood yet. After lunch, they continued working. She helped him sweep the barn, organize his tool bench, and clean the porch. The sun climbed high, and a warm breeze moved across the ranch. Time passed gently, almost too quickly. Later in the afternoon, after finishing another task, she sat on the porch steps and sighed, not from frustration but from simple exhaustion mixed with peace. Ethan brought her a glass of cold water and sat beside her. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," she said. "This place feels calm, like it breathes slower than the rest of the world." He smiled. "I like to think so." Lena looked at the open field, her eyes thoughtful. "When I said you paid for me, now do it. Yesterday. I didn't mean it in a strange way." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "I just wanted you to let me do what I offered. I didn't want to feel like I was taking help without giving something back." "I understand," he replied. "You have a lot of pride in your work. That's a good thing." She smiled softly. "I try." The rest of the day passed with more small tasks, soft conversations, and moments of quiet understanding. By the time the sun began to lower, turning the sky orange and pink, Lena had finished everything she could. "It's getting late," she said, brushing dirt off her hands. "I should head home." Ethan nodded, though he felt a small tug of disappointment. "Thank you for everything today." "Thank you," she said warmly, "for letting me help." She walked toward her car. Ethan walked with her, stopping beside the driver's door. "Drive safe," he said. "I will." Before she got in, she looked at him once more. Her eyes held something gentle, something that felt like the start of trust. "If you ever need help again," she said softly, "you can ask." Ethan felt a warmth he couldn't describe. "I'll keep that in mind." She smiled, started the car, and drove away, leaving a trail of dust behind her. He watched until the car disappeared over the hill. Then he looked around the ranch. Everything looked the same as it always had, yet somehow the place felt different, lighter, warmer. He didn't fully understand why, but he knew one thing for certain. Lena's presence had quietly changed something inside him. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that her day of help had given him much more than he had given her. In the days that followed, Ethan found himself thinking about Lena more often than he expected. He thought about the way she worked with quiet focus, the gentle way she spoke, the strength in her eyes, and the softness in her smile. He told himself it was only because she had helped him so much, but deep inside, he knew it was more than that. Something about her had touched a place in his heart he had kept closed for a long time. A week passed before he saw her again. It was early morning when he drove into town to pick up supplies. As he parked near the grocery store, he noticed a familiar figure standing by the notice board outside. It was Lena, pinning a paper carefully as if she didn't want to draw attention. When she saw him walking toward her, she looked surprised but happy. "Ethan," she said with a warm smile. "You're here early." "Could say the same about you," he replied with a small laugh. He glanced at the paper she was hanging. It was a simple message offering tutoring for children who needed help with schoolwork. He admired her even more for that. "Helping the kids in town?" he asked. "If they need it," she said softly. "I'm good with schoolwork, and it helps me earn a little extra. My family still needs support." Ethan nodded. "That's generous of you." "It's necessary," she replied calmly. They talked a little longer, and before she walked away, she said, "It was good seeing you. I hope your ranch is doing well." "Better than ever," he said, and he meant it. After she left, he felt a strange emptiness, as if her presence had quietly warmed something inside him and her leaving had suddenly cooled it. He shook the feeling off, bought his supplies, and drove home. The next morning, something unexpected happened. While Ethan was repairing a broken gate near the front pasture, he saw Lena's car slowly driving up his dirt road. He wiped his hands on a cloth and walked toward her with a confused but curious expression. She stepped out, holding a small basket. "Hi," she said softly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Ethan replied. "Everything all right?" She held out the basket filled with fresh bread and small jars of homemade jam. "My mother made these," she explained. She wanted to thank you for supporting us at the auction. Ethan blinked, touched by the thoughtful gesture. This is too much. It's not, she said gently. You helped us. This is the least we can do. Ethan accepted the basket with a smile. Tell your mother thank you. I appreciate it. I will, Lena said, but she didn't get in the car right away. She glanced around the ranch, then back at him. Are you busy today? Always, he joked lightly, but nothing I can't handle. She hesitated. If you ever need help again, I'm free for a few hours. Her offer felt natural, not forced. Ethan looked at the half-broken gate he had been working on, and then back at her. Actually, if you're willing, I could use another pair of hands. Her face brightened. Of course. Together they walked to the gate. Ethan showed her what needed fixing, and she helped hold the wooden boards while he hammered them in place. The work wasn't difficult, but it felt easy because they did it together. As they worked, small conversations flowed naturally, like tiny streams joining into a gentle river. Ethan asked about her siblings, and she told him about their school projects, their small joys, and the way she tried to keep them hopeful even during hard times. She asked him about his ranch, and he shared stories of the horses he had raised, the fields he had plowed, and the years he had spent alone working the land. Sometimes they worked in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt peaceful, like they didn't need to fill every moment with words. After the gate was fixed, Ethan invited her to sit on the porch for a moment. They drank cool water as the warm breeze brushed past them. Lena looked at the view, the open fields, the calm animals grazing in the distance, the wide sky stretching endlessly above. This place feels like freedom, she said softly. Ethan nodded. It's quiet, but I like it that way. You don't get lonely? She asked, turning toward him. Sometimes, he admitted, but I guess I got used to it. Lena looked thoughtful. I think people learn to hide loneliness behind work. I do that too. Her words struck him deeply because they felt true, not just for her, but for him as well. A little while later, Lena stood up and dusted her hands. I should go. There's a lot to do at home. Ethan walked her to her car. She paused before getting in and said, Thank you for letting me help. Thank you for helping, he replied with a warm smile. She smiled back, got in, and drove away. Ethan watched her until she disappeared down the dusty road. He felt lighter than before, as if her presence had filled the quiet spaces of the ranch with a gentle energy. Over the next few weeks, they began to see each other more often. Sometimes Lena stopped by on her way to town to drop off something her family cooked. Other times, Ethan drove into town and found her working at the local library or helping a neighbor. One afternoon, Ethan saw her painting a wooden bench outside the community center. She looked focused, her brow furrowed slightly, her hands moving with careful strokes. He walked over and offered to help, and she accepted with a grateful smile. They spent the afternoon painting together, laughing softly whenever the wind blew dust onto the fresh paint. Another day, she called him to ask if he had extra tools she could borrow to fix a leak at her home. Ethan didn't hesitate. He drove over, helped her repair the leak, and stayed longer when her younger siblings excitedly asked him questions about ranch animals. Lena stood nearby watching with a warm, almost shy smile. Their connection grew in small moments, shared work, shared silence, and shared kindness. Neither of them said anything about what was forming between them, but they both felt it. It was like a gentle thread woven through their days, slowly pulling their lives closer. One evening, as Ethan was feeding his horses, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Lena standing by the barn door, holding a small bag. "Your mother send more jam?" he teased. She laughed softly. "No, this time it's from me. I made biscuits." Ethan raised an eyebrow with amused surprise. "You made them?" Yes, she said with a smile. Don't worry, they're edible. He laughed, shook his head, and thanked her. He motioned for her to join him while he finished feeding the horses. She walked beside him, watching the animals with interest. You're good with them, she said. They're easy to understand, Ethan replied. They don't hide how they feel. Lena nodded. I wish people were that simple. Ethan glanced at her, noticing the softness in her voice. Some people are, he said. She looked up at him quietly, her eyes warm. The moment stretched, filled with a gentle understanding neither needed to put into words. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turned golden, then pink, then deep blue. Lena stayed longer than usual, sitting on the porch with Ethan, talking softly about dreams she rarely shared. How she wanted to study someday, how she wished her family could feel less burdened, how she wanted life to feel full instead of heavy. Ethan listened, quietly absorbing every word. He didn't offer big speeches or promises. He simply listened, and Lena felt the comfort of being heard. Before she left that night, she said something that settled deep in his heart. Being here makes me feel safe, she whispered, and I don't feel that often. Ethan felt something stir inside him, a quiet protectiveness, a warmth, a hope. You're always welcome here, he said gently. Lena smiled, a soft, genuine smile that stayed with him long after she drove away. And though neither of them said it out loud, they both knew that something real was beginning to grow between them. Something steady, something honest, something that had started with a simple act of help and was slowly turning into a deep connection neither had expected. The weeks moved forward like soft waves, calm and unhurried. Ethan found himself growing more and more comfortable with the idea that Lena was becoming a gentle part of his life. Her visits were never planned, yet they always felt natural. Sometimes she came to help, sometimes she came to borrow something, and sometimes she came simply because she wanted a moment of peace. Ethan never said it out loud, but he waited for those visits, listening for the sound of her old car coming down the dusty road. One afternoon, after a long morning of repairs on the ranch, Ethan decided to drive into town to pick up a new tool he needed. When he arrived, he noticed a small crowd gathered outside the local clinic. People were speaking in soft, worried voices. Ethan's heart tightened as he walked closer. He saw Lena standing among them, her hands pressed together anxiously. He walked toward her quickly. Lena, is everything all right? She looked up, surprised to see him, and her eyes immediately softened. But behind her soft expression, he saw worry. It's my father, she said quietly. He had a dizzy spell this morning. We thought it was just exhaustion, but then he couldn't stand properly. We brought him here. I'm sorry, Ethan said sincerely. Is he stable? Yes, she whispered. They say he just needs rest and better care. But it's hard, Ethan. Everything is heavy these days. Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You don't have to carry it alone. She looked at him, her eyes trembling slightly. But before either of them could say more, the doctor came out and called her family inside. Lena gave Ethan a grateful look before stepping away. Ethan waited outside, not wanting to get in the way, but also unable to leave. He stood near his truck, watching people come and go, thinking about how much responsibility rested on Lena's shoulders. He admired her strength, but he also wished she didn't have to be so strong all the time. After nearly an hour, she came out. Her expression was calmer now, though still tired. She walked straight toward him as if she had expected him to still be there. He's okay, she said. They want him to take medicines and rest more. They said stress makes it worse. That's good news, Ethan replied gently. At least he's safe. She nodded. Her eyes glistened for a moment, but she blinked quickly, holding herself steady. Thank you for waiting, she said softly. You don't have to thank me, Ethan replied. I didn't want to leave you alone here. Lena breathed deeply, the tension in her shoulders easing just a little. Could you drive me home? My brother took our car to get medicine and I don't want to wait here. Of course, Ethan said at once. As they drove to her home, the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the kind of quiet shared when two people already understand each other without needing many words. Ethan glanced at her a few times. She stared out the window, her mind somewhere far away, but the small trust she showed by leaning back in the seat made his heart warm. When they reached her home, she invited him inside for a moment. Her house was small but full of warmth. Pictures on the walls, soft cushions on worn-out chairs, and the smell of fresh herbs from the kitchen. Her younger siblings greeted Ethan happily, remembering him from his last visit. Lena checked on her father, who was resting in bed. When she returned to the living room, she found Ethan sitting quietly, waiting. She sat beside him, her shoulders dropping in visible exhaustion. I don't know how to keep everything together anymore, she said in a low voice. Every time I think things are getting better, something else happens. Ethan looked at her, his eyes steady and warm. You're doing more than anyone could expect. But even the strongest people need help sometimes. She stared at him, her expression softening. Do you really think I'm strong? I know you are, he said. Something inside her seemed to loosen. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she spoke in a voice almost too soft to hear. Sometimes, I'm tired of pretending everything is fine. You don't have to pretend with me, Ethan said gently. Her eyes lifted to his, and they held each other's gaze in a silence filled with understanding. It wasn't romantic. It was something deeper, trust built slowly over time. That evening, Ethan helped her with small chores around the house. He fixed a loose shelf, checked the leaking pipe he repaired last time, and even helped her siblings with their homework. Lena watched him with quiet gratitude, each moment deepening her comfort with him. When the work was done, Ethan prepared to leave. But before he could step out the door, Lena said, Can I come by the ranch tomorrow? I just need some fresh air. Ethan smiled softly. You're always welcome. The next day, she arrived just after sunrise. Her eyes still carried traces of exhaustion, but there was a calmness in her face now. Ethan gave her a warm smile, and they went for a slow walk around the ranch. The grass was cool under their feet, and the morning air smelled of dew and earth. Lena breathed deeply. This place feels like a different world. It's your world, too, Ethan said before he could stop himself. She looked at him, surprised by his words. But instead of pulling away, she smiled. A small, soft smile that made something inside Ethan settle in place. They walked to the horse paddock, where Ethan introduced her to a gentle mare named Daisy. Lena stroked the horse's neck with careful hands. Daisy nuzzled her palm, making Lena laugh softly, the kind of laugh that sounded rare but precious. She likes you, Ethan said, watching her with quiet admiration. She's sweet, Lena replied. Animals understand feelings better than people sometimes. Ethan nodded. They do. They spent nearly the whole morning walking, talking, sitting in the shade, and simply breathing. Lena seemed lighter here, as if the ranch helped her let go of the weight she carried. At noon, Ethan prepared a simple lunch, and they ate it on the porch. Lena leaned back in her chair, looking peaceful for the first time in days. Thank you, she said quietly. For today, for yesterday, for everything. Ethan looked at her for a long moment before speaking. You don't have to thank me. I'm glad you're here. Her eyes softened again. She held his gaze, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them. Something warm, something growing, something that neither of them could ignore anymore. But just as the moment deepened, Her phone buzzed. She read a message, and her face tightened slightly. "My mom needs me home," she said softly. "They're having trouble with the water pump again." "I can come help," Ethan said without hesitation. Lena hesitated. "You've already done so much." "It's not a burden," Ethan said. "Let me help." She breathed out, touched by his sincerity. "Then, all right." They drove together to her home. Once there, Ethan repaired the pump while Lena prepared tea in the kitchen. When he finished, she handed him a cup, and they sat outside for a few moments. "You make things feel easier," she said quietly. "And you make things feel brighter," he replied. She lowered her eyes shyly but didn't deny it. In the following days, Ethan visited more often. Sometimes it was to help. Sometimes it was to check on her father. Sometimes it was simply because he missed being near her. And she, though still shy, didn't hide her happiness when he arrived. Slowly, gently, naturally, their lives were beginning to blend. The ranch was no longer just his world, and her heart was no longer carrying its weight alone. Neither of them had said anything about their feelings yet, but the connection between them grew stronger every day, waiting quietly for the moment when it would no longer be silent. And that moment was coming sooner than either of them realized. Ethan woke up early that morning, long before the sun appeared over the hills. The air was cool, and the world was still quiet, as if everything was waiting for something important to happen. He sat on the edge of his bed for a moment, taking a slow breath. For months he had been helping Lena's family, fixing things, supporting them through the storm, and spending long days working side by side with her. Those moments had changed him in ways he never expected. He had gone to that charity auction thinking it would be just another simple day. He never imagined it would lead him to someone who would change his entire life. But here he was, sitting in his room, thinking about her smile, the way she pushed back loose hair while working, and the quiet strength she always showed even when things were difficult. Something inside him told him it was time to speak his feelings clearly. He had kept them inside for too long. Across town, Lena was also awake early. She stood by the kitchen window, watching the gray sky turn lighter. Her siblings were still asleep, and her mother was stirring a pot of oatmeal on the stove. Lena rubbed her hands together, trying to warm them. Her home still showed signs of the storm, some parts repaired, some still waiting, but inside it, there was peace. It felt different now, more hopeful, and she knew that Ethan had played a big part in that change. Lena's mother glanced at her and smiled softly. "You've been quiet this morning." Lena shrugged a little. "Just thinking. A lot has happened these past months." Her mother set a bowl on the counter and turned toward her. "You know, sometimes life brings people into our path for a reason. Some people come and go, but some people stay because they are meant to." Lena knew exactly what her mother meant. She lowered her eyes, feeling her face warm. "He helped us so much, more than we ever expected." "He didn't help because he had to," her mother said gently. "He helped because he cares." Lena looked out the window again. There was truth in her mother's words. She had seen that care in Ethan's actions, in the way he listened, and in the quiet comfort he brought during the storm. But feelings were complicated. She had learned to carry burdens alone, to depend on herself, and letting someone in was not something she had done easily. Yet with Ethan, it felt natural. It felt safe. Later that morning, Ethan saddled his horse and headed toward Lena's farmhouse. The sun was brighter now, shining gently on the fields. As he rode, he thought about what he wanted to say. He had never been someone who talked much about emotions. But for Lena, he was ready to try. When he reached the farm, Lena was sweeping the front porch. She looked up as she heard the sound of his horse approaching. Her expression brightened in a way that made Ethan's heart feel lighter. "You're early today," she said. leaning the broom against the wall. "Couldn't sleep much," Ethan replied, stepping down and tying his horse. "Thought I'd come by." She walked toward him, wiping her hands on her apron. "Is everything okay?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, everything's fine. I just wanted to talk." Something in his tone made her pause. She motioned for him to follow her to the porch. The sun warmed the wood beneath their feet, and a soft breeze carried the scent of fresh grass. They sat side by side, both a little unsure, both trying to gather their thoughts. Ethan looked at his hands for a long moment before speaking. "These past months, helping your family, spending time here, it's changed a lot for me." Lena listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "I came here at first because of that auction," he said, almost laughing at how strange it now felt. "I never expected anything more than fixing a fence or two. But then I met you, and now I wake up thinking about you more than anything else." Lena felt her heart beat a little faster. She tried to hide her smile, but it was difficult. "You don't have to say anything yet," Ethan continued quickly. "I just want you to know how I feel. I care about you, Lena, not out of duty, not because of the auction, but because you're someone I've come to respect more than anyone I've ever known." Lena took a soft breath, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She had spent so long pretending she didn't have feelings of her own. But now, sitting next to him, she couldn't keep them hidden anymore. "I care about you too," she said softly. "I didn't know how to say it before. I didn't even know if I should. I've always been used to taking care of everything alone. But when you came into our lives, things felt different. Lighter. I started to feel like maybe I didn't have to carry everything by myself." Ethan turned to her, relief washing over his face. "I don't want you to carry things alone anymore, not if I can help it." Lena looked at him, her eyes warm and honest. "You already help more than you realize." For a long moment, they sat in comfortable silence. The world around them seemed to pause, as if giving them space to understand the weight of their words. Finally, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Not fancy, not polished, but meaningful. He opened it gently. Inside was a simple ring, silver with a small stone, crafted with care. It wasn't expensive, but it held sincerity. "I don't have big speeches," Ethan said, his voice steady but soft. "But I know what I want. And what I want is a future with you, if you'll have me." Lena felt her breath catch. The ring glowed faintly in the morning light. She looked up at him, and her eyes became misty, not out of sadness, but deep emotion. "You're the person I trust most," she whispered. "And yes, I want that future too." Ethan let out a long, quiet exhale, filled with relief and joy. He slipped the ring gently onto her finger. She looked at it, smiling through the soft tears that formed. Her mother watched from the kitchen window, her hands pressed against her chest, her eyes full of happiness. When Lena turned around, she saw her standing there, smiling warmly. Her siblings peeked from behind her, giggling excitedly. Within weeks, preparations began for a small wedding. The townspeople joined in, offering decorations, helping with food and sewing clothes. Everyone remembered the day Ethan had first bid at the auction, never imagining it would lead to this. On the wedding day, the sky was clear and gentle sunlight bathed the open field where they stood. There were no loud bands, no grand decorations, just close friends, family, and the peaceful beauty of nature. Lena walked toward Ethan with calm steps. She wore a simple dress made by a neighbor, and her hair was tied with a small ribbon. Ethan waited for her near a wooden arch built from the same boards he had used to fix her porch months earlier. When she reached him, he held her hands gently. They exchanged vows filled with gratitude and love, words that came not from tradition, but from the heart. When the ceremony ended, the entire crowd cheered softly. Lena laughed, a sound filled with pure happiness. Ethan looked at her with a smile he could not hide. It felt like everything in his life had finally come together. As the sun began to lower, casting warm golden light over the field, Ethan and Lena walked hand in hand toward their new life. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling complete for the first time. He had come to her life as a helper. She had come into his as a quiet strength. Together, they found love where they never expected it, and that was how, through a simple auction day, a storm, shared work, and hearts slowly opening. The rancher who once lived in silence finally had a wife, and a life filled with warmth, hope, and companionship.